The Nightmare.
When I was younger, I experienced a terrifying ordeal during a regular weekend ritual, babysitting my siblings. As the oldest of four, this task often fell to me, especially since my parents were keen on keeping their marriage robust with regular date nights. I didn't mind much, it kept them happy, and after witnessing my cousin's parents' turbulent divorce, I was willing to do my part. So, on a chilly evening in late November 2008, I watched my parents' car disappear down the foggy lane of our rural Oregon home, nestled in dense woods. "Be safe," I called out, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. The quiet of our secluded location enveloped me as I retreated inside. My siblings were a varied bunch. Emma, the youngest at 3, was a bubbly toddler. Ben, 2 years older, was the quiet one, often lost in his own world. Sarah, closest in age to me but still younger by 6 years, was the rebellious middle child. Despite our differences, I felt a deep sense of responsibility for them. I set them up for the night, Ben with his train set in the living room, Sarah with her sketchbook in her room, and Emma, tucked into her crib with her favorite lullabies playing. I settled down in the kitchen with a book, enjoying the rare quiet. An hour or so into my reading, Ben appeared, his face twisted in confusion. "There's tapping," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Confused, I asked, "Where's the tapping coming from?" He pointed towards the back of the house, towards Sarah's room. Her window. Alarmed but trying to remain calm, I followed him. Sarah's room was dark, the only light from her nightlight casting long shadows. I listened intently but heard nothing. Assuming it was a branch or an animal, I was about to dismiss it when I saw Sarah, wide-eyed, pointing at her window. I hesitantly approached the window, heart racing. Parting the curtains revealed nothing but the dark, wooded backyard. Yet, there, unmistakably, were fresh footprints in the mud, leading up to the window and then away, disappearing into the trees. Panic set in. We were alone, far from any neighbors, and my parents were unreachable on their date night. I gathered my siblings in the living room, trying to appear calm. Emma was blissfully unaware, but Ben and Sarah sensed my fear. I decided to call the police, but our landline was dead. It was then I realized our isolation could be a disadvantage. Frantically, I locked all doors and windows, urging my siblings to stay quiet and in one place. For what felt like hours, we sat in silence, straining to hear any sound. Then, suddenly, a loud thud came from the roof, followed by heavy footsteps. Someone was walking up there, pacing back and forth. We huddled together, terrified. The footsteps continued, then stopped abruptly, followed by a sickening sound of scraping against the side of the house. Whoever was outside was now trying to get in. In a moment of desperation, I remembered the old cellar in the kitchen, a remnant from the house's past as a farmhouse. I ushered my siblings inside, locking the door behind us. The cellar was dark and musty, but it felt safer than being in the open house. We stayed there, listening to the sounds of our intruder rummaging through the house. At one point, the footsteps came right above us, making us hold our breath in fear. Hours passed, and eventually, the noises ceased. Dawn was breaking when I cautiously opened the cellar door. The house was a mess, but there was no sign of the intruder. My parents arrived home to find us shaken but unharmed, the police right behind them. The investigation revealed that an escaped convict had been hiding in the woods near our home. He was caught a few days later, but the incident left a lasting impact on us. My parents never left us alone at night again, and I developed an overprotective streak towards my siblings. Years have passed, and we've all grown up. But to this day, the sound of tapping on a window sends a chill down my spine, a stark reminder of that fearful night when our home felt anything but safe. Story 2. I always had a hunch that there was something peculiar about my rabbit, Mr. Whiskers, but I never could put my finger on what it was exactly. The day it all began was like any other. I was tending to my garden in the mild evening breeze. Mr. Whiskers was roaming freely as usual, nibbling on grass. But as dusk settled in, I noticed something strange. He was no longer hopping around. Instead, he sat unnaturally still near the hedge, his eyes fixed on me. Not the innocent, curious gaze I was used to, but a deep, unsettling stare that sent shivers down my spine. I shrugged off the uneasy feeling and went back inside. Later that night, the atmosphere in the house felt heavier than usual. My cat Luna, usually a serene and independent creature, suddenly seemed agitated. She paced around restlessly before finally jumping onto my bed, her body tensed and eyes darting around the room. I tried to calm her, but she was inconsolably on edge. Then, out of nowhere, Mr. Whiskers appeared at my bedroom door. This was highly unusual because Mr. Whiskers was a shy rabbit, preferring his cozy corner in the living room to any human interaction. But there he was, standing eerily still, his eyes boring into mine. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. Something was very wrong. The room felt suffocating, and Luna was now growling softly, her gaze fixed on the door. That's when I heard it, a gentle tapping, followed by a voice that chilled my blood. "Hey, can you let me in?" It was unmistakably my father's voice, but how could that be? He was supposed to be in another country on a business trip. Panic set in. My mind raced for a logical explanation, but there was none. The tapping grew more insistent, the voice more pleading. "Please, open the door." But I knew it couldn't be my father. I had to get out, and fast. Without thinking, I grabbed Luna, opened the window, and prepared to jump. 1, 2, 3. I counted, then leaped out with Luna clutched tightly in my arms. We landed roughly but managed to escape unharmed. I ran to my neighbor's house, where I called the police. They arrived quickly but found nothing amiss at my house. No sign of forced entry, no sign of Mr. Whiskers or any intruder. My family was supposed to return from dinner that night, but they never did. The police launched an investigation, but there were no leads, no evidence. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery of that night haunted me. I moved away, unable to bear living in a house filled with such eerie memories. But every time I drive past my old home, I see Mr. Whiskers. He's always there, perched by the window, staring out with those same unnerving eyes. I've tried to convince myself that it was all a product of my imagination, a trick of fear and shadows. But deep down, I know something unexplainable happened that night. Something that involved Mr. Whiskers, something beyond the realm of the ordinary. A part of me still seeks answers, but another part is too terrified of what those answers might be. Story 3. A shadow in the basement. It was a calm Friday evening, and my brother and I were in the basement playing video games, lost in the virtual world. Out of nowhere, we heard a strange dragging sound coming from the far corner of the basement. We paused the game, thinking it was just the house settling, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more unsettling. Both of us were frightened, yet we reassured ourselves that it was probably just some animal that had found its way in. After all, our basement was known to have small openings where critters could sneak through. However, the notion that it was just an animal was shattered when we heard a distinct, deliberate knocking sound against the basement wall. No animal made sounds like that. In a mix of fear and bravado, my 20-year-old self decided to investigate. As I slowly approached the corner, the noise abruptly ceased, almost as if whatever was making it was aware of my movements. My heart pounded in my chest, and my mind raced with possibilities of what it could be. My brother, standing at a safe distance, whispered, "Don't go any further." But I was too intrigued and, admittedly, too stubborn to back down. I reached the dark corner and hesitated before turning on the flashlight. The beam pierced the darkness, but there was nothing there, just an empty corner. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I realized something crucial: there were no windows or vents in that part of the basement. Whatever had been there couldn't have left physically. We quickly ran upstairs, grabbed our phones, and didn't stop until we were outside the house. Jumping into the car, we drove straight to our friend's house, not daring to look back. At our friend's place, we tried to calm our nerves with food and drinks, but the eerie experience lingered in our minds. Eventually, we gathered the courage to return to our house. As we recounted the story to our parents, they were skeptical until a similar dragging sound echoed from the basement. My brother and I exchanged a knowing, terrified glance. Despite their initial disbelief, my parents agreed to check the basement with us. The familiar dread enveloped me as we descended the stairs, and just like before, the noise ceased when we reached the bottom. My father, leading the way, cautiously opened the door to the storeroom where the sound had originated. There, in the dim light, was a tall, shadowy figure crouched in the corner. It was motionless, almost blending into the darkness. My father shone the flashlight directly at it, revealing a faceless, black form. We were rooted to the spot in shock, unable to comprehend what we were seeing. In a panic, we shut the door and hurried upstairs. My mother was already calling the police. When they arrived, they thoroughly searched the basement but found nothing. The officers took our statements, each of us describing the same unsettling figure. To this day, the mystery of what that shadowy entity was, and how it could have appeared in our basement, remains unsolved. Now, years later, as I lie in bed beside my wife, writing this, I can't help but wonder if anyone else has encountered something similar. This experience from my youth is a chilling reminder of the unknown that sometimes lurks in the shadows of our own homes. Story 4. The shadows in my house seem to move on their own. Hello Reddit community, I'm writing because I've found myself in a bizarre and frankly unnerving situation in my new home. Here's what's been happening. I moved into this house about a month ago. It's an older house with a lot of charm, and everything seemed perfectly normal at first. However, recently, I've started noticing something peculiar about the shadows in the house. It began with the feeling that something was off, like the shadows were slightly misplaced or moving when they shouldn't be. At first, I dismissed it as my eyes playing tricks on me, especially since it only happened in my peripheral vision. But as time went on, the movements became more noticeable and harder to ignore. One evening, things escalated. I was sitting in the living room when I noticed the shadow of the armchair appeared to shift independently of any light source. It was subtle but unmistakable. I got up to investigate, thinking maybe it was a trick of the light, but as I approached, the shadow seemed to recoil, as if it was aware of my presence. That's when things turned truly eerie. The shadows around the house began to exhibit a life of their own. I'd see them stretch, shrink, or shift position in ways that defied explanation. It was as though they were alive, observing me, responding to my movements. I couldn't sleep that night. The play of shadows on the walls made me feel like I was being watched. Seeking rational explanations, I asked my neighbors if they had noticed anything strange about the house. They exchanged glances and quickly brushed off my questions, assuring me the house was fine. Desperate for a peaceful night, I stayed at a friend's house, but the phenomenon followed me. The shadows in their house behaved just like the ones in mine. It was as if whatever was causing this was attached to me, not the house. Concerned for my sanity, I consulted with a psychiatrist to ensure I wasn't experiencing hallucinations. The psychiatrist found no evidence of any mental disorder that would explain what I was seeing. Frustrated and sleep-deprived, I've tried to document these occurrences. However, capturing the shadows' movements on camera has proven difficult. They seem less active or elusive when I try to record them. After speaking with the landlord, I learned that the previous occupants left abruptly, but there were no records or reports of anything unusual. Yet, some of my neighbors now admit to hearing rumors about the house having a strange aura, but they're reluctant to talk about it. I'm now contemplating reaching out to someone who specializes in paranormal phenomena, as this is beyond anything I understand. If anyone has experienced anything similar or has any advice, I'd be grateful to hear it. Story 5. An unexplained encounter on a hiking trip. About a month ago, I embarked on a solo hiking trip. My journey spanned from the lush valleys of Manali to the serene landscapes of Shimla, both breathtaking destinations in India. The trek was supposed to cover roughly 100 kilometers. I set off at dawn, energized and ready for the adventure. By midday, after several hours of hiking, I had covered a good distance. Deciding to rest, I found a secluded spot near a stream. It was tranquil, the perfect place to catch my breath. As I sipped water, I pulled out my phone to check my progress on a map. To my surprise, my location was not showing up on Google Maps. I tried all the usual fixes, restarting the phone, toggling location services, even switching to airplane mode and back, but nothing worked. It was as if I had vanished from the map. What added to the eeriness was the stillness around me. Usually, trails like these are frequented by fellow hikers or the occasional wildlife, but there was an unusual quietness, and the sun seemed unnaturally static in the sky. As I was trying to make sense of it all, an elderly man appeared. He looked like a local hermit, with wise eyes and a calm demeanor. He inquired about my puzzled state, but before I could respond, he began speaking about my journey as if he had known my plans all along. His insights were startlingly accurate, leaving me speechless. He invited me to his nearby abode, a modest hut crafted from the surrounding nature. Inside, we conversed for what felt like hours. He spoke of the mountains, the trails, and life's mysteries with a depth that was both intriguing and comforting. Realizing it was getting late, I expressed my need to continue my hike, fearing I wouldn't reach Shimla before dark. The hermit simply smiled and assured me that time was on my side. He advised me to continue straight on my path and not to return the way I came. Something about his presence and words compelled me to heed his advice without question. As I resumed my hike, a strange fog seemed to lift from my mind. I couldn't recall the specifics of our conversation, his appearance, or even the location of his hut. It was as though my memory of the encounter was shrouded in a haze. After walking for about half an hour, I paused and checked my phone again. This time, my location appeared on the map. But what truly astonished me was the time. It was only 12:30 p.m. I was baffled. I had left the stream where I took my break at around 11:55 a.m. How could I have spent hours with the hermit and still be so early in the day? And more perplexing, how did I traverse such a significant distance without any awareness? I reached Shimla by 3 p.m., hours earlier than I had anticipated. Even now, a month after the incident, the experience baffles me. The lost time, the mysterious hermit, and the feeling of being in a trance-like state, it's all too surreal to explain. What transpired during those hours? Who was that hermit, and how did I get to him? These questions linger in my mind, an unsolved mystery from an otherwise ordinary hiking trip. Wow, these stories really took us on a journey, didn't they? From mysterious encounters to unexplainable events, each tale left us with more questions than answers. But now, it's your turn. I want to know what you think. Do you have any theories about what happened in these stories? Maybe you've had a similar spooky experience? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. I'll be reading through them, and who knows, your comment might be featured in my next video. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe and hit that bell icon so you won't miss any of our future adventures into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the mysteries of the world around us. See you in the comments.